everybody, it's Amelia here with the Bad Astrologers Q&A for March. Thank you so much to everybody who submitted questions. We have lots of questions this time and I'm gonna do my best to get through them all. Before we get started though, I just wanna say that I hope that you're all okay, you're safe, sound, well-stocked, that you and your loved ones are all right. It's been a really scary time and I think about y'all a lot, and I hope that your situation is as stable as can be, and if not, I hope that this can give you some guidance in these very difficult times. And I also appreciate you deciding to be a patron. I know you know, that's obviously a financial contribution, but it means everything to us and I care deeply about you. So, all right, let's get started, shall we? All right, so the first, I love this question. It's a very juicy question. Comes from Daniel. It says, this is a more abstract question, however, and if you want to deal with it in some other format, that's fine. No, we're gonna deal with it here because it's great. Anyway, some people are starting to point out that the North Node next week will be in the same position that it was on September 11th, 2001. This seems kind of gimmicky, but I was wondering what you thought of such an observation and whether it can help us to understand what's going on right now. To me, the two events feel very different, but that might be because I am about 18.5 years older. Okay, this is a great thing to bring up. I've been hearing this all over the internet, and I talked about it a little bit in our coronavirus episode, but we'll dig in with a little more detail here. Yeah, so that is true. So to be specific, the North Node is going to be at 3 degrees of Cancer right about now, which is where it was in the chart of 9/11. Obviously there's fear mongers everywhere. You know, I think you asked whether I think it's relevant. I would say yes, sort of, but I think it's reaching. There's been this boom of people who are, you know, everyone feels like they have to justify their existence right now. Everything has changed, and especially astrologers, you know, everyone wants to be the one who predicted this, when in fact, I don't know if I would want to be the one who predicted this because it's such an awful time. You know, I think we can be reasonable and honest about the landscape before us, while still providing people a beacon of hope and an opportunity for healing. And I'm not so sure that like jumping back to 9/11 is the best way to do that. But yeah, I mean, that is there. In my opinion, stuff like the North Node, like the nodes matter, but if I was looking at similarities between charts, you know, the North Node being at the same degree is like not quite enough for me to freak out yet. I would be looking for something different, maybe like eclipses or outer planet transits, although the nodes do matter since they sort of, they do have a link to the way the eclipses roll out. I don't know, I don't really see it as much. I do think, so here's what I think is important about this question. So, you know, the North Node at 3 degrees of Cancer was really significant for America because it led to this sort of surge in patriotism and themes of home and security, like the literal later on founding of the Department of Homeland Security, all very Cancerian themes. And of course, America, the country itself, is a Cancer with a birthday on July 4th. So that matters. But I'm a little more interested in what will happen when the North Node moves into Gemini on May 5th, which is a sign of domestic and short distance travel, and also how we connect with each other. So obviously after 9/11, like those of us who are old enough to remember, like it changed everything. You know, there was traveling before 9/11 and traveling after. And I think that was really, obviously it's had massive cultural impacts worldwide, but I think on our day-to-day lives, that is where we saw the most like measurable change. Every time we have to go to an airport and put all our shit in a tiny little bag or check our bags, like we remember what that was like. And so that's what I'm most curious about. You know, I don't think it's like coronavirus is the second coming of 9/11 or whatever, but I do think that we'll see in some ways similar outcomes, you know, because people are sheltering in place as they should be. Obviously we're very restricted and limited on traveling at all, and we're having to find new ways to find community and connect with each other. Some of us are connecting more with our local neighborhoods as opposed to far away folks, which would be more of a ninth house thing, or a Sagittarius thing. So yeah, I think I mentioned this online. I was reading Edwardson's memoir. It's over there, that's why I looked. And I think the themes of his life and story, he's a super duper Gemini. He's got like Sun, Rising, Mercury, and a bunch of other stuff there. And I think the themes of his story of information and the way we talk to each other on the internet, and what we share or what we choose not to share, for what purpose, that's going to be really a lot of what the North Node into Gemini on May 5th is going to be about. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I also wanted to mention that, the United States is having a Pluto return. That's true. So people don't have Pluto returns because it would take, not yet at least, because it would take too much time. We die before that. But with, the United States having a Pluto return, it's like a double dose of Pluto's sort of slash and burn energy. And I think it's a coming of age for our country, and a reckoning that has sort of revealed the ugly, darker sides of what we are not doing well, not doing enough of, and has really already broken down many things. I know a lot of people wondered, like, what is the US's Pluto return going to be? And I think now we have a little better feel for what to expect in the coming years. So that's going to be slow, very slow. It's going to be years and years of this kind of upheaval, and that's a little daunting and a little scary. But I think that we will find other things in the stars, and we'll find other things within ourselves to guide us through. I really do. Another thing to consider is that Saturn just moved into Aquarius, and there really hasn't been that much planetary action there in a while. And back during 9/11, Neptune and Uranus were also in Aquarius, so there's a little bit of a similar feel. And to me, Saturn in Aquarius feels like a little bit of a precursor to Pluto in Aquarius, which is coming later in 2023, 2024. So yeah, I think this is a beginning. This is not the end. This is a beginning of a new phase, and it might be really scary right now, but I am very curious to see what it brings in the future. That's a lot. I hope it helps you. Okay, next question from Van. She says, is there a light at the end of the tunnel in all of this, and when? Woo, what a question. Yes, I would say yes, but I think it's going to be a gradual, like, instead of like pulling the shade up and the light, radiates down and blinds you, it's going to be a slower, gradual, like the light is on a dimmer switch and we slowly turn it up, right? So here's the deal. I think that the real light at the end of the tunnel is going to be the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the Great Conjunction in Aquarius. That's going to be on the winter solstice for us in the Northern Hemisphere. And that is going to be very profound and powerful. Great conjunctions, we talked about this a little bit in the 2020 forecast. So if you want to go back and listen to that bonus episode, we get into it a little bit there, but they roughly correspond to American election years. And they bring sort of a sea change in society. And I really believe that in Aquarius, this is going to be, I'm not going to pronounce it good or bad, but I will say that we'll see things shift and change. And I imagine, learn from the absolute catastrophe that this has been, and create something new. I'm sorry, it's almost made me a little teary thinking about it. As an astrologer, it's a really weird thing to have part of your work be folks, asking you, like, what do you think about this tragedy, and when is it gonna stop? And a lot of us are drawn to this work, like myself, because we want to help. And I feel like this is the best I can do to help. It's a little bit of hope many, many months down the road. But part of the practice of astrology, I think, it's better and more helpful instead of looking for like a panacea in months from now. Although I do think that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction will be very powerful, and it's going to bring positive forward-thinking energy back into the world. I think looking into your own natal chart to find areas of comfort. Look at your IC, which is about your home and safety. Find ways to feel good while sheltering in place. Look at your 12th house. That's the house of isolation. So I can give you a little bit of an idea of what this retreat can be for you. But yeah, I think looking at those things in your chart will have a much more helpful effect than trying to look forward into the future. Because here's the facts. I don't know what's going to happen. I would say I wish I did, but I don't know. I like the surprise. That's in the prognostication episode as well. But empirically, with the information that we do have, Jupiter and Saturn together in Aquarius seems like a very good sign. I'm quite looking forward to it. And then in early 2021, there's going to be 6 out of the 7 visible planets will be in Aquarius at once, and I, for one, am looking forward to it, and I think you should too. So keep your fingers crossed. Let's all send up our prayers and vibes and hopes for each other. I know the thoughts and prayers is kind of like a thing that gets poo-pooed, but I think in these times, whatever you do to cultivate the practice of hope matters more than we may ever realize. So do that. Okay. Oh God, I'm touching my face. That's like, does anybody else during the self-isolation feel like it's like a deep, deep struggle not to touch your face? It's not great. So, next question. Katie says, so I think you've mentioned yods in people's charts, and I think I have one too. Can you explain how these work and how to best work with those configurations? Thanks for continuing to do this great podcast. Happy to do it. Happy that it's keeping you sane. So yeah, let's talk about them. You do have a yod. I checked your chart, and it is a really lovely, high-powered yod. I think it's great, and I think that's, it looks to be like your whole chart. You don't have any other aspect patterns. It's really driven by that yod. So it makes sense that you would be drawn to this concept. So a yod, in astrology speak, is when there's 2 planets that are sextile one another, and then each of those is quincunx, another planet over here, and it makes a long triangle that looks like a finger. And yod in Hebrew means finger of God. And in the natal chart, it is supposed to be someone who, I don't know, it's like, I guess like God put his finger into your pie and is like, yes, you have a special fate. You're meant to, go out and do something really important. It's people who have, the traditional wisdom says it's folks who have this like very spiritual purpose, but I find often that it's in charts of folks who like have resistance around that, or like didn't get it right on the first try, not that any of us do, or that like it doesn't come naturally to them, and that makes perfect sense. So a quincunx, or also called an inconjunction, I'll call it an inconjunction here, is a minor aspect where the planets are 5 signs away from each other, and it represents like tension. I think of it as dissonant notes, like when you make a chord and it's just, ugh, what is that noise? But it's still beautiful, right? I have the Chopin book behind me. A lot of his songs have that sort of dissonant, lots of sharps and flats and such, and I think that yod people can have that they can find beauty in dissonant places and within the dissonance of their own life. Sometimes people describe quincunxes as like tense or awkward, and I think that you asked about working with a yod. I think part of the yod human experience is that of learning how to get comfortable with your own awkwardness and experiencing a lot of it, especially early on in life. I think later, maybe after your Saturn return, once you figured out more of like, okay, these are what my gifts are, I feel pretty confident about where I'm headed. It makes a lot more sense. You're able to really strive for that. But it takes time and it takes practice. Nobody said that having, God push you down a special path, if that's part of your belief system, it feels really good all the time. In fact, it will probably push you into situations. Think about Joseph Campbell, like the hero's journey. Like, it pushes you out the door and you have to go and face down these monsters, and it's great. So for you personally, your yod is Pluto in your 4th house, sextile Saturn and Neptune conjunct in your 6th house, with Venus and Jupiter at the apex in the 11th. So I see this as someone who wants everything to feel magical. All those outer planets, they're able to allow you to feel magic, but in this very structured way, because Saturn's there too. It's like the very act of practice and everything you do, you want to enchant it. You want it to feel heightened, or like it has more meaning, like it's transforming you with every step. But I think, so that's the base of the yod. I think that you don't experience maybe as much of the yod awkwardness or stress, because Venus and Jupiter, the 2 benefics, are at the apex. But I also think that, so Venus and Jupiter together can be a lot of excess. It can be like wanting to party all the time instead of working, or wanting to run off with like 5 different lovers, but like at the same time, so you have to clone yourself. It's a little overwhelming. It's a lot. But I think maybe this is about, that's very heavy energy at the base of the yod. So this could be about lightening up, right? Especially in your 11th house. It's like, okay, listen, like your job is to be light, to let your imagination soar, to enjoy all of the things that the world has to offer and share them with, I hate this phrase, but the collective. Star Trek fans know what I mean. It's weird and gross. But yeah, I really think that that's what it is. You want things to feel magical, and you are willing to use your network to inspire hopes and dreams and change in the world. Yeah, I think Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune, they support each other at the base, and it's a little bit easier on you because Venus and Jupiter at the top, that are kind of doing this pole motion, they are doing all the heavy lifting. So I hope that made sense. I hope you like it. I'm going to give you an example of a person who has a yod. Martha Stewart has a yod. Okay, so I've been obsessed with Martha Stewart's birth chart lately. Look it up, it's awesome. But the point is, so, her life has had many peaks and valleys, many ups and downs. And she's not a perfect person, and she's not what you would, you think of her as either avaricious with the insider trading, or like, overly sweet, saccharine, let me bake you a cake type. And I think that tension, that uncomfortable place between those, like that is where the yod is. Like that is what the energy is. So enjoy. I hope that helps. Okay, so from Anne, she asked, general question, why do we never talk about where Earth is in our chart? Is it worth considering? Thank you, in all caps. Okay, so this is actually a pretty simple answer. I'm sure you can find lots of stuff about it online, but from what I understand, so the tropical zodiac is from the point of view of Earth. So there's the sidereal zodiac and the tropical zodiac. The sidereal zodiac involves many other constellations besides the 12 that we accept in the tropical zodiac, because it looks at the entire sky, not from the point of view of Earth. Earth is included in the fact that we're using the tropical zodiac, more or less. So that is why we don't use it in the chart. Like Earth is the vantage point. So the cool, fun thought experiment with this, I think, is considering if we leave Earth one day and explore the galaxy, and I certainly hope that we do, I guess we're fucked, because like astrology, the current system of astrology that we're using won't really apply unless we just like kind of grandfather it in and say, oh, well, if you were born on Earth, it makes sense, or this or that. Or I'm sure astrologers are an ingenious bunch. Like we'll find a way, as life finds a way. But yeah, that's the answer. Next question. This is a very long one, but I will go ahead and read it out. It says, the last time I sent in a question to Bad Astro in December, I was wondering about making big moves and big decisions. In November and December last year, I was truly hyping myself up for that Jupiter return. I had crystal clear visions of the future, but since the beginning of this year, every single plan I've made seems to have failed, and with such drama that I can only laugh about it. Jupiter can be drama. I'm so sorry. To summarize for context, I quit 2 side jobs in quick succession, only for my main job to get shut down by the virus. I'm so sorry about that. You work in theater performance, which over where you live is the first to go. I know people in theater are having such a hard time. There are arts organizations, there are Broadway organizations you can donate to, and I highly recommend that not you, but our other listeners do that for sure. You have plans to travel, now you're back at your parents' house, waiting out the pandemic in the middle of the woods, wondering what the hell is going on. You have had many tough conversations with my partner recently, but he doesn't seem to acknowledge, let alone celebrate, any changes in the way we relate to one another. An inspiring but also sexually charged new friendship entered your life. And it's not been easy to navigate that either. I've honestly never felt this cracked open and laid bare almost, and it feels like your sense of identity hasn't experienced a rupture like this in like a decade. So is there any insight on this moment to be gained from your natal chart? Is this something I'm missing? Maybe there is a bigger purpose to all of this, something that you need to learn? Well, there's always someone to be learned from any situation. Situations are the best teachers. But here is what I'm going to recommend you look at, just a couple of things. So first, Saturn just moved into Aquarius not long ago, and that is activating your Venus in the same sign. So it's saying that you have to be serious about your relationships and your creative commitments alike. Saturn-Venus alignments, particularly the conjunction, are really hard because they bring up difficulties with feeling worthy, right? Like it can be either something in your childhood, or you personalize situations to, instead of saying this happened around me, everything's gonna be okay, you know, not everything is my fault. You're like, well, there was some flaw in me, like I am a flawed person and I'm not enough, and therefore that's why this has occurred. And that's not true. That's not the way it is. And I think Saturn-Venus transits can reveal to us the ruptures, the places in our relationships and in our creative practices, and in our also our relationship to our money, where we feel broken and in need of repair. And it can also help you, it reveals them, but it also gives you the tools you need to make the repair, right? So it doesn't leave you high and dry. It might cause a lot of things to shift as they have, but the good and frustrating thing is that some of the best growth can come from these sort of difficult situations. I'm not saying that you required a global pandemic to do this. I'm sure there was another way. But I do think that learning to be on your own and learning to have those tough conversations with your partner or with this new love interest is gonna help you get in touch with what you value within yourself, right? So I think before you take any more steps on that, I would work on healing whatever part of you feels like is ruptured. Like I would want to hear more about that, right? Like what exactly within you feels ruptured? Is it your relationship to your sensual self? Is it your ability to produce art? That's been incredibly hard given the current circumstances. So, ask yourself the tough questions and trust that Saturn on Venus, Saturn on Venus can also bring really serious relationships, the ones that aren't working out, move on, but it can also like solidify your bond with the people who do matter. Also, the nodes moving out of your 7th house and into your 6th house on May 5th is going to help a lot. So the node, the North Node in Cancer is just like exacerbating all this for you. It's so intense since that is your relationship house. And I think when it moves into Gemini, which is your 6th house, The emphasis will be less on the other people around you and feelings and such, and it'll be more about what you can build and the structures that you can create to support yourself. So I'm looking forward to that for you. Also, I'm going to talk about your Jupiter return. So yeah, your Jupiter return is over. It's not in the same sign anymore, even though it was Jupiter in Sagittarius at 29 degrees. It has moved on, and it's not within orb anymore. But I just wanted to mention, and also in the Jupiter episode, this was mentioned as well, a Jupiter return doesn't necessarily promise like success. Jupiter returns are actually the beginning of a cycle, the planting of a seed. So it could be that what happens now that seems small could be something that expands to such an amazing and awesome degree that in the future you look back and you're like, wow, that's when that started. I started my online astrology practice during one of those, and at the time I thought I was just, like messing around on the internet, like meeting new people and writing lots of notes down and reading lots of charts. And when I look back, I can identify that specific moment as sort of the birth of this here. So you never know. Keep the faith. You were doing amazing. I think that your stellium in Capricorn is going to be activated by Saturn and Pluto for a while. But I think Jupiter there this year also, it's going to help. It's going to make, I know that you feel like your life is totally ruptured, and Saturn and Pluto together, like that makes perfect sense. But I think Jupiter, even though it's in its fall, is going to help you. So stay strong, and if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. Okay, next question. It says, for the upcoming Q&A, I would like your insight on coexisting in quarantine with my partner. Woo, okay. It says he's an Aquarius sun, Aries moon, Venus in Aquarius. I'm an Aries sun, Aquarius moon with Venus in Pisces. Weirdly mirrored signs. I'm also Mercury in Aries, and he's Mercury in Aquarius. Okay. We had been living together for 5 years, the last of which were rocky. At the end of January, I made the crushingly painful decision to leave and move out. Oh gosh. However, that was the catalyst for some really open and honest dialogue. Long overdue things were said, and we agreed to stay together as a couple, though I insisted on maintaining our separation and keeping my new place. I had a month in my new home, getting settled, and the relationship was massively improving, particularly in the erotic realm. So much opening up on his and found autonomy on my part. And then Corona hits, and he and I decided to self-isolate together, because otherwise we'd be apart for who knows how long. Things have been good so far. It's nice to not be alone. I'm glad you're not alone in this bizarre time. But I'm also worried that being thrown back together so soon at his, formerly our flat, is going to ruin our progress and regress us to bad old patterns. Any wisdom in the stars? Anything I can do or not do to keep us on track? That's a great question. I love the proactiveness of like, what can I do? What can I not do? So before we get started, I wanted to say that for my readings, I have a firm rule that I only look at the individual who has actually reached out to me's chart, especially if there is an express permission from a partner to do a reading for them. The thing is that astrology is here to help you. You can get the most benefit from looking at your own chart, and you should focus on that before you focus on a partner, especially if you're going through a difficult time with your partner. That said, you've already provided the information, so why not use it? Let's see what we got. So you have this incredible symbiotic relationship with your partner that I honestly, I've never seen anybody with synastry quite like this. So there's sun sextile sun, moon sextile moon, and Mercury sextile Mercury. So a sextile is a beautiful, harmonious aspect that's just gentle and lovely, and that means that you naturally identify with each other, you make each other feel comfortable, you communicate very well, so keep those lines of communication open. Like, you already have an incredibly strong foundation. It just feels, your relationship probably largely feels effortless, and maybe that's where problems come in. Like, the people who we feel effortless with, it's difficult at times to remember that they need our tending to. So if there was to be a problem, I would say it would be your 2 Venus signs. So that's not insurmountable. So his Venus, I guess that's not as important. It was a very highly independent Venus. But your Venus in Pisces, we have a whole episode on Venus in Pisces, and that can be a very challenging aspect or placement. I know that it's exalted, but that just like enhances the sort of porous boundaries and desire for everything to be this like beautiful poetic moment at the expense of, you know, having necessary talks. But I think for you, all that Aries and Aquarius going on in addition to that is going to keep you from like the real pitfalls. Oh, it's Venus and Aquarius. So he's going to want a lot of space, and you're going to want to just have like the deepest, most romantic interaction all the time. So I think the best thing that you can do is just give him space, right? I don't know if you've ever read anything about attachment styles. Like it seems like Venus and Aquarius would be avoidant. And I'm not a therapist or psychologist, by the way. It's like the thing I like to read about. I found it very helpful. And then Venus and Pisces would be more anxious attachment. So might be some fun reading to do. And finally, I know that you asked about your ascendant, and it has changed. You're not a Pisces rising, you're an Aquarius rising, and I am so excited for you with that. I think that is going to help you with this as well. Like Aquarius, it also shows me that you have this such a natural and lovely romantic compatibility with your partner. Venus on the ascendant is just like this natural affinity and joy in one another's presence. So that's great. You know, Aquarius rising is very independent. You can have a lot of, you think a lot, especially in romance. You can sometimes think more than you do in romance. So my advice would be stay grounded in your body and don't overthink it. Like get spiritual with it if you need to. Okay, so next question. We have a lot of relationship-based questions. I know these are very intense for you, and I wish you all the best. I know that being in isolation with someone can bring out lots and lots of different things, so stay strong. Okay, so this person says that my long marriage is breaking up, and even though we never found a way to talk to each other in 35 years, I don't want to start a new life. I'm terrified to be alone, even though I usually love to be alone. I have 3 great kids who you're close to. You feel like you don't have the energy or will to embark on what lies ahead. Side note, we also crashed back in 2008 but recovered. I was hoping for a love revolution if Bernie won. I hope Bernie wins this year, but looks like I'm in my head too much, obviously. Okay, so you're going through a lot. This is very stressful, but the stars do have some clarity for you. So right now you have Vesta exact conjuncture Gemini Sun, and in the Vesta episode we talk about that being devotion and sort of sublimating your love to a higher level. And so it could be that things that felt all right to you before are no longer okay. Like you're looking for something deeper and more profound and more meaningful, and that is totally all right. That's actually healthy and important. You know, it sounds like you are definitely of service a lot in your, you know, obviously if you're asking these kinds of questions, you're thoughtful. You said that you have a great relationship with your kids, so you're definitely of service in a Vesta kind of way, but I think you're looking to your partner and saying, where's the same from you? I need that from you. And I think that with eclipses headed for your 2nd and 8th houses, that's going to really throw into contrast. So that's going to be starting over the summer and continuing for the next couple years. So the 2nd house is resources, right? Like income, money, but also like food, commodities, and also the nourishment that we give ourselves. And then the 8th house is sex, intimacy, and also what you share, like what you share within a marriage, so shared assets, things like that. So I think that as that happens, you know, the 8th house, if you were to decide to split up with them, the 8th house can be a sign of splitting up, but not necessarily. Like it can just as easily be you two decide to reconcile and take it to a deeper, more profound level than ever before. So it all makes sense, and I think it's really up to you. I don't have enough information about the situation to really, I'm not here to tell you what you should do. You know what you should do in your heart and in your mind already. But the stars are supporting you. In addition, you're having a Saturn return, like exact. When you sent this, it was exact. So Saturn, your Saturn is at 29 degrees Capricorn. Right now, Saturn is at 0 degrees Aquarius, so just like right there. And Saturn returns are incredibly difficult times that fundamentally change us as people. And if you're in a marriage with someone and you're having a Saturn return, if they're not willing to put in the same level of work, because Saturn is work, it can feel insurmountable. It can feel incredibly difficult. You need to, right now more than anything, you need to be understood. But my advice would be focus on yourself. My advice is always focus on yourself, but especially for your Saturn return. Saturn responds so well to practice and structure and just getting out there on the field and getting strong and doing everything you can to sort of pull yourself up. And I think that you can do that. I know that's probably not what you want to hear. Like, I wish that there was a quick solution, but understand that the Saturn return does not necessarily have to be a bad thing. Saturn returns are neutral to good, in my opinion. I'm a Saturn fan. I think that the rewards that you get from Saturn are more long-lasting, probably because they are hard ones. So hang in there, trust yourself, and you can get through this, I promise. Okay, so Laura says in our next question, hi Laura, not sure if I'm too late, but I just listened to the asteroid episode, yay, glad you listened, and discovered that I have Medea on my IC in Pisces. I have no idea what this means, to be honest. Maybe you could give a little overview. Yes. One of the things I've been looking at lately is I've been going through a ton of transitions, is that when I was younger, I had a meaningful spiritual practice, Christianity, which I no longer adhere to, same. But haven't made a ton of room for spirituality in my life since my mid-30s. It's been more of interest to me in the past couple years, exploring tarot and astrology, and the idea of a magical practice is an intriguing one. Are there other things you see in my chart which I could explore in this direction? I love this question. Okay. There's this TikTok, I don't know if any of y'all watch TikToks, where this shit-eating little kid, he says to his grandmother, I love the way this cake is cut. The cake is cut horrible. And the grandmother, like, smacks him down or something. Dumb story, just to say that, like, I say that all the time. And I'm surprised I haven't said it on the podcast yet. This is a Patreon-only content, right? I hope it's good. Okay, so, Laura. Medea on the IC, to me, is depth, like the deepest depths. Medea is a tricky figure, is kind of dark and complicated, and on the IC, I think it gives you the power to enchant your home in a way. Like, you can sort of make your home your magical or spiritual sanctuary. Which is super cool. If you're thinking about doing a spiritual practice, consider setting up an altar in your home. You might find that to be a really meaningful and surprisingly effective tool for spiritual growth. It can be really simple. Like, even this right here is a little altar. I have Isis and I have some wisteria blossoms from outside, and everything on here. I have my rosary from my late grandmother from when I had First Communion. I have this over here from my other grandmother, full of mementos. So, it doesn't have to be a really conspicuous, like, Instagram fancy altar, right? It can just be things that matter to you, right? These are the things that matter to me. And that's why I do this video here. So put something together that represents what matters to you. Medea there, I think, also means that you have a fierce drive to protect your independence, almost to a dangerous point, but that's okay. I think the fact that you're asking the question is proof that you'd be willing to mitigate that. And also, with Medea on the IC, I would be a little concerned about childhood. Like, I don't know what your family life is like. I don't know if there was like a female figure that you struggled with, but that might be something to work through as well. So broader spiritual practice stuff, you might want to check out the Witch Moment episode again. We talked about the 2 houses you would want to look at to sort of build a spiritual practice, or the 9th house and the 12th house. So you're a Sagittarius rising like me, and the 9th house for you is Leo, and then the 12th house is Scorpio. It's an interesting paradox, as Leo wants to be very visible and seen, and Scorpio is very intensely private. One is very optimistic and loud and proud and happy and generous, and the other one is very dark and you know, not gloomy, but aware of the realities and the taboos that exist in this world. As far as spiritual practice, I think finding something that allows you the space to be both. You know, for me, that was being a sort of public figure in the spiritual world. Not that you have to do that, but you could connect with people in 9th house type spaces, like writing about it, or journaling, or you could, you know, doing that while simultaneously keeping a part of your practice private. Like, this is in my home, and you know what I have, but you don't know the meaning of what's up here. So what does Scorpio move? I did not mean to flex so hard. Okay, so I hope that helps. Also, the fact that Neptune is in your 12th house in Scorpio gives me a little indication that, like, I think that not meditation, but like dream work or somehow honing your intuition could be a really good thing for you. But also, you need to keep your boundaries strong. Do not fall prey to guru types who are like, I will tell you how to live your life. Just keep giving me, you know, $500, $1,000, more and more and more dollars. You know, we all have to make a living, but like, I think at a point it gets a little creepy and weird. So just watch out for the cult leader types. Keep your boundaries strong. Stay firmly planted with your feet on terra firma, and you'll be fine. Tarot cards might be a good place to start. Dream journal and tarot cards, and report back, okay? Last question. It says, my Saturn transits didn't suck. In fact, I really enjoyed it. Could you explain why I had such a good time? I was told it would be the worst experience of my life, but it wasn't. It was hard, but it was one of the best. What gives? I'm Capricorn rising with Saturn and Sagittarius, if that helps. So I mentioned this a little bit before, and I'll say it again. Saturn transits aren't necessarily bad. I love a good Saturn transit. I hate it in the moment. I bitch and moan and complain. But the positive results that you can get, the lasting positive results you can get from a Saturn transit are absolutely just unparalleled. You know, those are the moments that define you. They sort of mark out eras of your life. Especially, so you had your Saturn return first, but that would have been in your 12th house. So the 12th house is kind of a secret, quiet corner of the chart. So having your Saturn return there, it might not have been it might not have been as pronounced. It could have been like more secret behind the scenes, like an internal change, or like something that you had to hide from people, so it didn't feel as dramatic as, say, like, I lost my job and had to, you know, climb my way back up, or I had to, I got a divorce and I had to find my way back to love again. Like, the 12th house is the secret journey that probably no one will ever even know you took. Or it could be people who they don't have your best interests at heart. So you may have had to deal with a little bit of that, but Capricorn risings are very savvy, and I'm sure you survived that fine. And then Capricorn, having Saturn and Capricorn transit your ascendant was probably felt pretty good, because you're ruled by Saturn. Like, that's your home field advantage, right? Like, you already know the hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears it takes to make Saturn successful, right? And so it's not frightening to you. You're like, oh, I got this. This is my shit. I'm ready. So I think that's why. But even for those of you who might be listening who don't have Saturn in your chart, you know, placed quite as nicely. I think that don't fear a Saturn transit. Don't fear a Saturn transit. You know, Saturn, I always say, responds well to discipline and structure. And if you are being disciplined and structured in your life, there's a quote from Gustave Flaubert. It says, be fierce and original and oh no, I'm gonna mess it up, aren't I? It says, be strict and well-ordered in your life so you can be fierce and original in your work. Technically in French it says be violent and original in your work. So that's it. That's Saturn in a quote. That's how you rock it. And Capricorns naturally do that. Capricorn risings do. And so that's why you had a good time. But I think anybody can have a good time with Saturn if they try. All right, everyone. I really do hope that this was helpful to you. I've been talking a long time. I hope that you enjoy the horoscopes. I hope that you enjoy the forecast. I hope that you'll send more questions next month. I'm looking forward to doing it again. And just thank you. Thank you for being you. Thanks for sticking around, and I appreciate you.